Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. When pain wears a smile. Most people imagine suffering as something visible, a crisis, a breakdown, an open wound. Yet in truth, the most damaging kind of suffering rarely announces itself. It hides in plain sight, disguised as ordinary life. It wears the polite smile of the sarcastic coworker, the soft tone of the controlling mother who calls domination love, the laughter of the friend whose jokes leave bruises that no one else can see. These relationships do not scream or strike, they drain quietly, like slow leaks in the soul. The tragedy is that the human mind is built to rationalize what it cannot escape. We invent stories that make the unbearable tolerable. We say, they don't mean it, or, that's just how they are. We excuse cruelty as personality and disguise emotional neglect as maturity. But the body, that honest witness, keeps no such illusions. Every time we minimize a slight or swallow a truth, the body takes note. It registers tension in the jaw, tightness in the chest, fatigue that sleep cannot mend. Eventually, it screams through pain, illness, or breakdown, forcing us to confront what the mind refused to name. Gabor, in When the Body Says No, describes this perfectly. The body becomes the voice of what was silenced. Chronic illness, autoimmune flare-ups, persistent fatigue, anxiety, these are not random malfunctions but coded messages. They tell us that our emotional environment is toxic, that adaptation has gone too far, that survival has replaced authenticity. The body does not distinguish between physical danger and emotional oppression. To it, neglect and hostility are forms of assault. Consider the subtle ways this poison seeps in. A child learns early that expressing sadness earns scolding instead of comfort. A partner senses that disagreement triggers withdrawal, so they begin to smile through resentment. An employee absorbs constant microaggressions until even breathing at work feels like a performance. None of these scenes involve visible violence, yet each trains the nervous system to expect rejection, to live on guard, to compress real feeling into silence. Over time, that silence becomes the atmosphere of life itself. When this happens, the mind adapts by splitting reality. On the surface we say, everything's fine. Beneath, the body whispers, nothing is fine. We try to cure the whisper with productivity, self-help, or gratitude lists, but the ache persists because it isn't weakness, it's a truth signal. Pain, when listened to, is a messenger of boundary and integrity. Pain ignored becomes disease. What makes this pattern particularly cruel is its disguise. The environment that harms us often insists it is helping us. The mother who belittles her adult child claims she is teaching strength. The friend who mocks your vulnerability insists it's just honesty. The boss who overloads you calls it trust. Each justification deepens confusion until you internalize the lie, maybe I am too sensitive. Thus the victim begins defending the aggressor, fearing the loss of connection more than the loss of self. And yet, this normalization of pain is everywhere. Whole families, workplaces, and cultures are built on quiet invalidation. They tell us to toughen up, to stop taking things personally, to keep smiling. But what they call resilience is often repression. To survive such environments, we split from our own emotional truth. We perform strength while carrying exhaustion that no one sees. Maté warns that what helps us survive in the short term, emotional suppression, self-abandonment, chronic compliance, destroys us in the long run. The nervous system, starved of safety, begins to malfunction. The immune system, constantly mobilized, forgets how to rest. And one day, illness becomes the only language left. Recognizing this pattern is not an accusation, it is an awakening. When we finally acknowledge that pain can exist inside what looks normal, the first crack of light appears. We begin to see that healing is not found in endurance but in truth. It requires the courage to stop explaining away harm and to start naming it. Before the body says no, it always whispers, through tension, fatigue, headaches, or unexplained dread. Those whispers are warnings, not weaknesses. The question that decides our fate is simple yet profound: will we listen before the body screams? The weight of unheard feelings. Not every wound leaves a scar you can see. Some come wrapped in good intentions, softened by polite voices, disguised as care. Emotional violence often begins with the smallest sentences, ones that sound reasonable, even loving. You're overreacting. Don't be so sensitive. Others have it worse. Each phrase lands like a quiet erasure. It tells you that your inner world is an inconvenience, that your truth is excessive, that your feelings require moderation before they deserve acknowledgement. This is emotional invalidation, a kind of slow suffocation of the psyche that leaves no visible mark yet rearranges the nervous system at its core. At first, you try to explain. You search for better words, gentler tones, clearer examples, anything to make them understand. But each attempt to communicate is met with the same dismissive calm. They are unmoved. You are too emotional. So eventually you learn to stop trying. You start censoring yourself mid-sentence, translating your pain into something less threatening, less real. You smile when you want to cry. You nod when you mean no. You laugh when you feel small. The mask fuses with the face. According to Gabor, this repression is not weakness, it is adaptation. The child who is not permitted to feel must still survive the family. The partner who is met with mockery must still preserve the relationship. And so, the psyche performs a necessary miracle, it disconnects from its own authenticity to keep belonging. But belonging purchased with self-betrayal becomes a prison. What the mind suppresses for social safety, the body stores for biological truth. Those swallowed words and restrained tears do not disappear, they find refuge in muscles, in heartbeat, in breath. Over years, the price is paid through chronic migraines, gastrointestinal pain, autoimmune flares, panic attacks that seem to come from nowhere. The body remembers what the mind deletes. Every "it's nothing" becomes a message written into the flesh: you do not matter. And so a quiet war begins inside. The logical brain insists that everything is fine, after all, no one is shouting, no one is hitting. But deeper within, the emotional brain keeps score. It notices every moment you shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It knows that peace built on suppression is not peace at all, only paralysis. This inner conflict reshapes self-esteem. When your reality is denied repeatedly, you begin to doubt it yourself. You ask, am I too sensitive? Am I broken for caring this much? Slowly, the compass of self-trust spins wildly. What once felt true now feels suspect. And this confusion becomes fertile soil for further harm. The person who doubts their perception is easier to control. They apologize for existing, second-guess boundaries, chase external validation like oxygen. It is a perfect loop of dependency. The more invalidated you feel, the more approval you seek from the very sources that erase you. Most heartbreaking of all, many perpetrators of invalidation genuinely believe they are helping. The parent who says, "Stop crying," thinks they are teaching resilience. The friend who says, "Others have it worse," imagines they are offering perspective. But intention does not cancel impact. Each dismissal teaches the same lesson, that your vulnerability is unwelcome, that your emotions are liabilities to be managed rather than signals to be understood. Over time, people raised or surrounded by such climates develop a chronic emotional allergy to their own needs. They mistake numbness for maturity and endurance for strength. Society rewards this illusion. We celebrate stoicism, composure, professionalism. We call the emotionally detached strong. Yet beneath the polished calm lies exhaustion, the exhaustion of constant self-erasure. When you cannot safely express anger, the body turns it inward as tension or autoimmune attack. When you cannot weep, the uncried tears pool as fatigue. When joy feels unsafe, the nervous system forgets how to rest. Eventually, the body begins to act out what the tongue has been forbidden to say. Illness becomes biography written in biological ink. Healing begins the moment one dares to reverse the message, to believe that feeling deeply is not weakness but accuracy. Emotional honesty is not chaos, it is alignment. To reclaim it, you must first tolerate the guilt that surfaces when you say, "This hurts." Because guilt is the shadow cast by years of conditioning, not evidence that you are wrong. Maté reminds us, what the child could not express safely, the adult must learn to voice courageously, or the body will continue to speak in symptoms. Listening to those inner signals is an act of rebellion against the culture of dismissal. It is also an act of profound compassion. To feel without apology is to return home to yourself. It is to tell the body, "You no longer have to scream for me to listen." The prison of endless giving. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that does not come from working too much, but from caring too much in one direction. It is the exhaustion of being everyone's refuge but no one's priority. You become the listener, the helper, the one who always understands, a pillar of strength in other people's storms. Yet when your own heart trembles, you find no shelter. The calls stop. The empathy evaporates. The same voices that once poured their pain into you vanish into silence. At first, it feels noble, even purposeful. Being needed gives meaning. You tell yourself it's compassion, maturity, emotional generosity. But over time, something inside begins to hollow out. The self that once gave freely becomes an empty vessel, refilled only with other people's chaos. You start to mistake depletion for virtue. Gabor Maté warns that this imbalance is not selflessness, it is emotional neglect turned inward. Those who were taught early that love must be earned through service often grow into adults who overextend themselves to avoid abandonment. They become emotional caretakers of everyone around them, living as if the only safe identity is usefulness. Such people carry invisible contracts. They give warmth to cold rooms, patience to the impatient, forgiveness to the unrepentant. Their nervous systems live in permanent vigilance, scanning for distress they must soothe, pain they must absorb. But when the system never receives comfort in return, it begins to collapse. The signs appear quietly at first: trouble sleeping, fatigue that coffee cannot touch, random aches, irritability. Then come deeper signals, a sense of meaninglessness, isolation, and the haunting thought that if you stopped giving, no one would stay. The world often celebrates this pattern. Society calls them strong, selfless, resilient. They are praised for never breaking down, never saying no. Yet these compliments carry hidden demands: keep enduring. Keep smiling. Keep absorbing. What looks like admiration is often expectation in disguise. Soon, guilt replaces need. You start feeling wrong for wanting rest, attention, or care. Every impulse toward self-protection triggers shame. You tell yourself others have it worse, that you should be grateful. You confuse boundaries with selfishness, forgetting that even the heart requires walls to keep its rhythm steady. Maté describes this chronic self-abandonment as a physiological trap. When emotional reciprocity is absent, the body's stress response never shuts off. The adrenal system burns through reserves meant for emergencies. The immune system falters. The mind swings between exhaustion and hyperalertness, ready to rescue but too tired to live. The irony is cruel: the more you give, the less alive you feel. What once looked like compassion begins to resemble quiet self-destruction. Relationships built on one-sided giving are not relationships at all. They are emotional economies where affection is currency and guilt is tax. The receiver grows dependent, the giver depleted. And because imbalance has been normalized, neither sees the arrangement for what it truly is, a slow siphoning of energy masked as love. If you have lived like this, you know the strange emptiness that follows every good deed. You know the nights spent wondering why kindness leaves you lonely. You know the confusion of being praised for the very behavior that's destroying you. And yet, there is resistance to change, because giving is tied to identity. To stop overextending feels like betrayal. To say no feels like cruelty. But boundaries are not walls against others, they are walls against self-erasure. Healing this pattern requires a radical reversal. You must learn to receive without apology. To rest without justification. To allow others to face their discomfort without rushing to rescue them. This is not coldness, it is fairness. Every act of self-care is a quiet correction to years of imbalance. Eventually, you learn a painful truth: those who love you for your usefulness will disappear when you reclaim your humanity. Let them. Their absence creates the space where real love can finally breathe, love that does not demand exhaustion as proof of worth. The body, once drained by endless giving, begins to heal the moment you say enough. Muscles unclench. Breath deepens. Sleep returns. The nervous system, long addicted to crisis, remembers calm. You rediscover that compassion is meant to flow both ways, not drown the one who offers it. The prison of endless giving was never built by others alone. It was built by the fear of losing love. But when you begin to love yourself enough to stop bleeding for the world, you discover something extraordinary: that true connection requires not sacrifice, but balance. Only then can you give without disappearing. The hands that guide and bind. Not all control shouts. Some of it smiles. It brings tea, offers advice, uses soft words like care and concern. It strokes your hair while tightening the invisible leash. "I only want what's best for you," it says, right before it rearranges your choices. "You'll regret that decision," it whispers, every time you attempt to step outside the map someone else drew for your life. This is emotional control disguised as affection, the most sophisticated form of domination because it rarely looks like domination. It is the partner who praises your independence yet sulks when you act on it. The parent who claims to love unconditionally but withholds warmth when you deviate from the family script. The friend whose compliments come laced with quiet warnings: "I hope you know what you're doing." To the untrained eye, such relationships look caring, even safe. But beneath the velvet tone lies a constant current of manipulation. Each suggestion carries an undertone of guilt, each smile a silent reminder of what your obedience costs. Gabor Maté describes these climates as slow-acting toxins. They don't wound the skin, they wound the autonomy. They condition you to question your intuition, to pre-edit your truth before speaking, to seek permission to be yourself. At first you cooperate because it seems easier than confrontation. You convince yourself you're being reasonable, diplomatic, grateful. But slowly, your inner voice loses volume. Decisions that once felt simple, what to wear, whom to trust, which dream to follow, now feel like moral dilemmas. You anticipate disapproval before it arrives, shrinking your life to avoid imagined conflict. The cage becomes self-maintained, the captor no longer needs to lift a finger. Physiologically, this state is disastrous. The nervous system translates every micro-hesitation into danger. Muscles tighten, breath shallows, digestion falters. Anxiety turns into background music, a constant hum that never switches off. Mate notes that the body cannot distinguish between a growling predator and an environment where love feels conditional. Both demand vigilance, and vigilance sustained too long becomes illness. Perhaps the cruelest trick of covert control is that it keeps you grateful to your jailer. You thank the parent for protecting you from failure, the partner for keeping you grounded, the friend for being honest. You internalize their doubts until your confidence corrodes. Soon, even the thought of freedom feels reckless. You call it loyalty. You call it love. But the body calls it captivity. In such relationships, growth becomes betrayal. When you attempt to change, you threaten the balance that keeps the other person powerful. They react not with open hostility but with wounded confusion. You've changed, you're not the same person anymore. You hear sorrow in their voice and mistake it for love, but what you're witnessing is the grief of someone losing control. To preserve harmony, you regress. You clip your own wings. And in doing so, you become complicit in your own containment. Over time, this subtle coercion reshapes identity itself. You no longer ask what do I want? But what will they approve of? Authenticity shrinks to fit the contour of another's comfort. And because the world often applauds obedience, the good child, the supportive partner, the reliable employee, you may not even realize you're disappearing. Mate warns that this kind of chronic self-suppression eventually seeps into the flesh, persistent headaches, jaw tension, nausea that has no medical cause, exhaustion that rest can't fix. These are not random symptoms, they are rebellion in biological form. The body protests the unspoken rule that love must be purchased through compliance. Liberation, then, begins not with anger but with clarity. To name the manipulation is to puncture its spell. You start to see how every guilt-soaked favor, every, for your own good, lecture, has taught you to mistrust your own compass. The realization is painful, but pain is the price of reclamation. To reclaim your autonomy is to risk being called selfish. You will be accused of forgetting those who only wanted the best. You will feel guilt's cold hand on your throat. But that guilt is not a sign you are wrong, it is proof that the conditioning is dissolving. True care never demands surrender. It does not steer, it supports. It does not shrink your world to keep you safe, it widens it so you can explore. The moment you understand this difference, the spell breaks. You breathe deeper. Your posture changes. The muscles that once braced for judgment soften. For the first time, you feel the strange quiet of self-trust. And though those who thrived on your obedience may pull away, what remains is something far greater, freedom that no one can disguise as love again. When silence breaks the body. There comes a moment when the weight of everything unspoken becomes too heavy to carry. It doesn't happen with thunder or tears at first. It begins quietly, a heaviness in the chest, a tremor beneath composure, a fatigue that feels older than the body itself. You tell yourself you're just tired, that you only need a weekend off, that next month will be different. But deep down, something knows, the silence has turned against you. For years you have swallowed pain in the name of peace. You've told yourself not to overreact, not to make things worse, not to lose people you love. You've learned to wear serenity like armor. Yet every time you bury the truth to keep others comfortable, the body becomes the burial ground. The price of harmony is internal war. Then one day, it happens, a breaking point disguised as an ordinary conversation. You speak. Maybe timidly, maybe trembling. You finally say that you are hurt, overwhelmed, unseen. You expect compassion, or at least curiosity. But what greets you is indifference, a blank stare, a joke to lighten the mood, a quick change of subject. Perhaps even the gentle cruelty of, "You're too dramatic." In that instant, something fractures. A silence deeper than words descends, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes the air heavy. That is the moment the soul learns the hardest truth. To some people, your pain will never be real. Gabor Maté calls this the most dangerous wound, emotional abandonment in the face of explicit suffering. The nervous system, already stretched by years of repression, collapses under the confirmation that it is truly alone. The mind goes numb while the body begins to scream. Palpitations, dizziness, insomnia, digestive chaos, the body shouts what the heart was forbidden to say. It is not betrayal, it is biology. The organism fights for survival in the only language it has left. From that day onward, every ache carries memory. The stiff neck remembers the conversations you cut short. The shallow breath remembers the words you held back. The migraines remember the smiles that were lies. This is what Maté means when he says the body keeps score not of events, but of emotions unexpressed. Pain becomes autobiography written in nerve endings. The world, of course, will tell you otherwise. It will say you are anxious, oversensitive, hormonal, stressed. It will offer quick fixes, pills, affirmations, productivity hacks, anything that lets the system remain unchanged. But deep inside, you know that what ails you is not a chemical imbalance, it is a relational one. You have been living in environments where your authenticity costs you belonging, and the body refuses to pay that price any longer. This realization is terrifying because it asks for change. It demands you stop waiting for understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you. It insists that you choose truth over approval. Healing begins when you stop explaining yourself to the people who profit from your silence. Breaking the silence is not about confrontation, it's about reclamation. It means turning inward and whispering, "I will not abandon myself again." It means listening to the body as you once listened to everyone else. Every symptom becomes a teacher. The insomnia says you are living in fear, the back pain says you are carrying too much, the sore throat says you have words that want to live. When you finally honor these messages, something remarkable happens. The symptoms do not vanish overnight, but they begin to soften. The body, relieved at being heard, shifts from alarm to repair. The tremor in your hands becomes a rhythm of renewal. Breath returns like an old friend. You will still feel guilt, guilt for saying no, guilt for resting, guilt for not saving everyone. That guilt is the echo of your conditioning, not the voice of your conscience. Let it pass through you like weather. The world may label your new boundaries as coldness. Remember, only those who fed on your compliance will call your integrity selfish. In the end, this is not just about mental health. It is about the right to inhabit your own body without apology. Silence was never peace, it was paralysis. And when the body finally breaks that silence, through illness, fatigue, or tears that come without reason, it is not betraying you. It is rescuing you. The truth is simple and devastating. What destroys us is not merely what others do to us, but what we are forced to mute to remain loved. When you dare to speak, when you choose to listen to the wisdom of your own flesh, you end the war between body and soul. And that is where healing begins, not in noise, but in the sacred sound of a voice reclaiming itself.